Do you spend hours in your head thinking about something that happened, could have happened, or might happen? Do you ask others what to do so you don't make a mistake? Welcome to the Playing It Safe podcast. I am Dr. Z, your host. I am a clinical psychologist, an author, and a person that is super passionate about sharing with you science-based skills to overcome any type of fear-based struggles. Who doesn't experience fear? Who doesn't play it safe? In this show, we will discuss how fear-based reactions happen in day-to-day life, how playing it safe behaviors look like, sound like, and feel like, how you can put into action solid tips from behavioral science to get unstuck from worries, fears, obsessions, and anxieties, and how you can start doing what works, what matters, and what you care about. Behavioral science doesn't have to be boring. Thanks for listening, and let's get started. A couple of months ago, I connected with Annick Seys. The first time when we met over Zoom, we quickly shared our interests, passions, and it was clear that it was a real connection. Months later, I met Annick face to face in Cyprus when attending the annual conference of acceptance and commitment therapy. And here's what I can tell you. There are so many amazing qualities that Annick embraces as a human being. But if I have to choose the one that truly speaks to my heart, that's her authenticity. Annick is a professional speaker, ACT trainer, author, executive coach, and an ACT therapist. She is located in Hasselt, the Flemish region of Belgium. And in this episode, we discuss how you can make a transition, how you can make a shift from a life ruled by anxiety, worries, and fears to a life led by self-acceptance, self-compassion, and self-exploration. If you like this episode and you like the content of the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. Even one sentence helps. And if you tag me on your Instagram handle, I will thank you personally. I also want to encourage anyone listening that is interested in identifying those thinking strategies, those playing it safe moves that keep you stuck in your head, to complete the Playing It Safe questionnaire. It will take you 5 or 7 minutes to answer all the questions, and you will get the results right away. The results will show you the key thinking strategies that keep you living a contradiction between the life you want to live and the life that you are living in your head. So when you figure out your playing it safe profile, you will have the awareness to stop living small, to stop relying on ineffective playing it safe moves, so you can start living with purpose every day you are awake. To complete the Playing It Safe questionnaire, you can go to the website www.thisisdrz.com and select the option Playing It Safe questionnaire from the menu. Let's jump onto the conversation with Annick. I wish you a great day and see you next week. Bye-bye. Here we are, right? Trying to do something that speaks to our heart, something with meaning, and something goes off. How do you relate to those moments in which there is a huge gap between what you were hoping to experience, the things that you were hoping to do or to be, and what is? When there is a gap between what we're wishing for and what is.
Yeah, I wish I could say I'm always like Zen about it, but I rarely ever am. My tendency is to push myself, to force things when that happens, to hang on, to cling on to what I wanted or what I've envisioned. Yeah, that's what I usually do. But I think there's like two things that can, or for me, there is two levels of things that can go wrong. I think the first is what we just had, an issue, technical issue, and it's not linked to who I am. So there I can be very flexible and shift things, and that's not an issue. So that's one part. And then the other part is things that I want to, that I envision, that I want to do, that do somehow are linked to my perception of who I am.
Mm.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because you're pinpointing something very important here, the difference between facing things that are not related to our sense of self, to our sense of identity, to our ego. And
Yeah.
your honesty to say, sometimes I click into those things, right? I hold on to them. I am there with you. Certainly, I have done that hundreds of times in my life. Do you mind sharing maybe a moment in which you were doing something that matters to you, that you identify with it, that in some way reflects your sense of who you are as a person, and things didn't go well? How do we manage that?
Yeah. I think that the place or the domain in my life where I'm the most able to get stuck in is probably my job.
Mm-hmm.
And a part of it, a small part of it, is that it's like a public situation.
Mm.
So I had a training center for years. I trained a lot of therapists, and then I sold it in 2020. But having that, I had a very, very busy schedule, and I planned all kinds of things that I wanted to do. But then at the same time, I had to answer emails and do all kinds of other stuff. And somehow I never was able to plan that right. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is how the next coming week will be realistically.
Mm.
It was more like what I want to do next week and what I think is important to do next week. It's this, and this, and this. And then when it obviously often didn't work out that way, I just felt nervous and like as if I was failing and letting people down. And I felt pressure about money not coming in because I couldn't do this or that. But I think all of those anxieties that if you would ask me in that week what I'm anxious about, then I would tell you I have a busy schedule and I'm scared because I won't have enough money coming in and so forth. It's all just the surface.
Mm.
Inside, I think it was all about if I don't do this right, I won't be successful, I will fail, and I'm utterly not good enough.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a huge revelation, right? That many times we have these micro anxieties in some way,
Yeah.
right? But if we unpack them, then there is a deeper fear. And I think for people who are high achievers, strivers, and people with more perfectionistic behaviors, that's the underlying pain. Within acceptance and commitment therapy, we try to make a pivot from attachment to the conceptualized self to self-acceptance. And sometimes we think about self-acceptance as this acknowledgement of the reality of how we are, of who we are in the world. But it is hard. It is hard because that means letting go of all those notions. How do you experience that pivot? How do you experience self-acceptance?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing exercise.
Yes.
For sure.
It never ends for us, yeah.
But I think that what I did with, I mean, as I said, it is, as you said, it's a struggle. It's an ongoing exercise, and the best way to go about it for me is to be curious, to be able to say, I've been in this kind of situation before. What could be the thing that is happening with me deep down? Because I've been in this road before. And that's something for me is remarkable as humans. We seem to be going into this type of situations and be completely like taken by it, like, whoa, what is happening to me? I'm overwhelmed, or like as if you're surprised. But oftentimes this is a circle that you've visited many, many times before. So the major click for me was when I could become curious and say, I know this. What is this? And how do I know it? And then to look into the I'm not good enough. How deep is it? How true is it for me? Like not in a cognitive sense of no, it's not true because da, 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 I am well, I am worth it, I am worthy, etc. But more in a sense of for me, this is true.
Mm-hmm.
Let me visit that feeling and let me find a way to find compassion and to know that this is normal. This is normal behavior and normal thinking. If you know my past and I get pressured and I have all kinds of ideas to be worthy, and then something crosses that path, that I get panicky and that my answer to that is perfectionism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As you get curious about this feeling, this thought that says, I'm not good enough, what if I fail? And you really dive into and say, what is, and you make room for it.
Mm-hmm.
How would that look? Like if someone is next to you and they see you in that moment of being curious, will you be doing a mindfulness exercise? Will you be journaling? How will that look? For people listening to us, perhaps they find themselves sometimes trapped in perfectionistic behaviors, not doing things more and more, but never feeling good enough. So they're
Mm-hmm.
listening to us and they want to be curious and practice curiosity. How will that look? Any tips for that?
Yeah. I think that the first thing I try to do is look at it like an unresolved question, like a puzzle that I get in front of me, and I can like I'm doing this with my hands now, which of course already means I'm taking some kind of a distance of okay, let me now look into this. What do I know about this? How how is this familiar for me? Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, and of course the biggest struggle in that moment is I've been here before, and when I'm really stuck, I'm like, no, I haven't. This is different. This is something I need to dive into. And but I'm like, okay, just if it's too hard to think about this now, then don't, because you know that your mind is so rapid and so eager to find an answer
Mm-hmm.
to resolve that issue, that I'm like, okay, maybe tomorrow, maybe I don't need to resolve this today, because I know that I will not find answers that are thoroughly enough. I will stay at the surface, and that's not the place to solve this. So maybe I need to look into this tomorrow. And then
Mm-hmm.
I check again. I'm like, okay, maybe the day after. And of course, my mind keeps racing. And of course, there are moments where I think, I don't care. I need to resolve this and, get rid of all those philosophical questions. I just need an answer now. But I try to take some distance where my mind is a bit less racing, and I
Mm-hmm.
can take a bit more distance and find curiosity into, I know this before. What is the youngest feeling that I can link it to?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes I can ask myself, what's the flavor of it? Not really like, do I know an example where I've had this type of situation? Because oftentimes my mind can't find the example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I know the flavor of it. I've been here before. And of course I can listen to my body
Mm-hmm.
and have that same, my stomach. For me, it's my stomach that just crunches. So I do the same thing there. Like, where have I felt this when I was younger? What
Mm-hmm.
do I know about this feeling?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I usually start.
That's beautiful. I think that is such a compassionate and curious process, right? To really unpack this fear. There's a lot to say and unpack more. Of course, I have more questions.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
I'm curious here. Do you experience the fear of being a failure different than the fear of not being good enough? Is the quality of the experience different for you, or are they similar?
I think that's a very interesting question, looking at it from an RFT point of view.
Mm-hmm.
The language part of how our brain works is with language. And so I think actually using the words that really click for you is
Mm-hmm.
very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
For me anyway, it is. So not good enough often for me. Also, when I work with clients, it doesn't feel like it's close to their hearts. It's emotionally close. It's like this container concept that they're using, like stress is also a container concept for me. Like, what does that mean? How low is your worth for you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and does this have to do with feeling ashamed of yourself or feeling repulsive or
Yeah.
feeling that you don't matter um, or that people look right through you and they don't see you? Um, or are you a failure, for example? Like I try to look for words also within myself. Should I be ashamed of who I am? Those are more for me specific ways of diving into this issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lately, I have been thinking a lot about this in terms of how this intense fear of failing can be the source of perfectionistic behaviors, procrastinating behaviors, and the imposter phenomenon, right? Like second
Yeah.
guessing and doubting what we're capable of. There is also this fear of not being good enough that is driving all this. And lately, I'm curious, do we experience that differently? So that's what I was wondering here. The other point that came to me as you were sharing is that a lot of people have been exposed to toxic
Yeah.
positivity or right. I know we both are nodding our heads, but this is still happening in 2023. We still have the legacy of those toxic messages. I have clients that have been told that they have to look some part of their bodies, like their hands, and say how beautiful they are and all types of things in response to having any doubtful thought or any negative thought about themselves. For us as clinicians, we are very familiar with distancing, with diffusion, with creating a space and separating ourselves from our thoughts. And we acknowledge that our mind has a life on its own. But what would you say about these messages that are so popular these days?
You have 2 hours so that I can really say what I think about this. Yeah, I think it's so crazy. I mean, we know that this type of messages gets people further estranged from who they are because they, on top of the layers that are already there, they're trying to do something that they're not good at. And
Yes.
so it adds to not feeling good enough because I'm also failing in doing something that doesn't feel good to do in the first place. But if the psychologist or whoever, the coach tells you to do this and you're failing at it, then there is another failure added to it. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to say to this is I looked into pictures when I was younger, 20 years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
came across a picture. It's not so long ago, and I came across a picture of me in a bikini,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw the picture, and my stomach told me, like, oh, there is that ugly picture, and I looked at the picture, and I was like, what would be wrong with that? That's a beautiful woman. What's wrong with that picture? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I told my husband, and he said, I've been saying this to you all your life. Like, there's really absolutely nothing wrong with your body. Quite the opposite. I like your body, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't believe it. And I think that the reason why now I can say there is nothing wrong with that picture, and even today I can look at my legs and see the cellulite and think there's nothing wrong with my legs,
Mm-hmm.
is not because I try to convince myself, but
Mm-hmm.
is because that's how I feel. And I think there's a big difference. I mean, the example is for me quite simple. If you have a friend and you tell your friend, I'm so stuck, and
Mm-hmm.
your friend tells you, just stay on the positive side, dear, just, keep at it. I don't know, but that for me, that's not a friend I will call again.
Mm-hmm.
I will feel rejected. I will feel not understood. And if that is a voice that you're using for yourself, then I think we're in dangerous waters because you're distancing yourself from who you are. And I don't believe that's what we want to do.
Yeah, I had moments in which I got messages like that. And the experience for me is feeling unseen, and I feel alienated with messages like that. Because I think what we're facing is acknowledging the complexities of being human, and that comes with second guessing thoughts about ourselves and doubting ourselves. But to be who we are doesn't mean smashing any negative thoughts about ourselves or pretending they are not there. Have you found in your life and in your work any skills or exercises that will be helpful for people to tap into this observer self, the part of us that is in some way like more transcendental?
Yeah, one thing for me that helps is to come into the now.
Mm.
Because as we know in ACT, they're connected. To be able to go into the observer self helps you when you can observe whatever you're observing, and then you can observe the self. So one of the things that I do sometimes is go for a slow walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I start off walking at a pace that my mind is at, racing, and then I like slowly slow down until I walk very slowly. And so my mind starts not racing as much. And then I have this compassionate conversation with myself as if I'm really talking to somebody, like, what's going on, dear? What's wrong? And then, well, okay, and do you know this before? Have you ever seen this before in your life where this has happened? Because it sounds like this is not the first time, and it sounds really you're overwhelmed. And I try to be the best friend that I can find for myself.
Mm-hmm.
The experience then is for me double. One is I'm going to the observer self, like I can see what I think of myself. And the other part which helps me in this exercise is I feel confident that I'm able to solve this myself, which of course adds to another part of me that is not inconfident, but is confident and capable of dealing with difficult issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful response. As you were talking, there was something softening within me. I was imagining you walking and then really reflecting and trying to be your best friend. I think there is something really powerful here about acknowledging the half minds that we have, but really holding that gently as you're doing, trying to be your best friend. Not a friend that tells you, oh, get over it, it's going to be okay, everything is going to be fine, but a friend that really explore what's hurting, what's happening right now. That was very beautiful. And I want to encourage people listening to us to try this, becoming their own best friends in moments of stuckness, doubt, and fear. When we think about self as an observer within acceptance and commitment therapy, perhaps it's one of these processes that is mostly misunderstood by people. If you have to give the audience a brief definition of what is this famous self as an observer, what will that be?
Now there is an interesting question.
No.
I hope not a lot of experts are listening to this podcast, but I'll try and give it a shot. I would say that if I were to explain the difference, that's the thing that works for me best. Let me give it, yeah, I'm sorry to be chaotic, but let me give you an example.
All good.
Once I was in a store, in a shop, and I wanted to try on a dress. Mm-hmm. And it was like with all kinds of rope. So I had to, move the fabric, and I was like making a knot in the rope. And I came outside to look at my friend and see what she thought of the dress. And the first person I saw was a man who was sitting there waiting for his wife. And then behind him was my friend. And the first thing my friend did was point back at the where you try the dress. I don't know what the word is, but she pointed to me like, go back in. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, is the dress okay? Just go back in. And the guy was just like looking at me and he couldn't keep his eyes off of me. And I was like, what's going on? So I turned around and I said, what do you think of my dress? And she pointed even more drastically, go back inside. So I did. And I looked in the mirror and all of the fabric, I just had done it in the front. So I was like completely naked in the back, completely exposed in the back. So I laughed with it. Of course, I felt shame, but it was like shame as a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You can laugh with it. We can laugh with it. It's funny. It's just that, you know, nothing else happens. But like if you compare it to I am shameful,
Mm-hmm.
then it might even not be something that you feel. It's like something that you carry with you. And it's like, for me, I compare it to your socks.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know that you're wearing them unless that you start feeling, because otherwise you don't know that they're there. It's a much deeper layer. And the observer self helps you to be curious again and look into, could that be the thing that I'm carrying around? Let me look at situations where I encounter that I'm stuck and see what could be the thing that would be going on underneath there.
Mm-hmm.
And you need the stance of, I know I'm not that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is an I, and I have different kinds of feelings, and I have different kinds of behaviors, and I have different kinds of thoughts, like everybody does. Like we do, for example, you wake up in the morning and you already have a kind of a mood. I usually have a morning mood. And then when I go into the bathroom, I often put on my headset and just start dancing in my bathroom. That's a different mood than when I just woke up. And when I sit in my car, I usually drive too fast and I get annoyed for the people around me because I want them to drive faster as well. So that's a different mood. And then I come to work and I see a client, and usually I'm like, oh, I'm so happy to see you. It's a different mood. So we go through all these moods all day long. Like literally, maybe every 10 minutes, we shift it a bit. So it's not who we are, it's what goes through us. And this is also something that we carry with us. And let's look at it not from a stance of this is who I am, but from a stance of this is what I perceive that I often think of that I am. When I do, I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more than that person.
There is something powerful here. We cannot understand the self as an observer unless we're experiencing it and we're curious of it, right? It's like you don't notice your socks that you're wearing until you check and you start noticing them. And I think sometimes we're trying to understand this sense of self with our heads, but it's not like that. I know for me, sometimes I experience this sense of self as a soft part of me, a soft voice. It's not pushy, it's not demanding. Perhaps that's the best description, that for me, it's soft and it's not pushy or demanding. It's not asking me to do anything. It's very wise. Speaking about this wise self that we all have, sometimes we don't know how to tap into it because we are over-identified with our accomplishments or with our failures. We are over-identified with our careers and projects and contracts and books. How do you see that today, given where you are in life?
I'm in a good place. Yeah, I totally get what you're asking. I think for me, the difference between the two voices is one of the things that we need to discriminate, that we need to learn to know the difference. Like what voice is talking to me before you want to do anything else. You want to gather the information. That's how I go about it. Like I consider it that the voice of who I believe I am are lessons learned in life. A very, very young age. It's embodied. It's like, you know, your body has memories. It's there. And for me, it's, as I said, it's my stomach. I feel threatened. I feel anxious, and it's all black and white. And the thing that I'm worried about is super important. And there's only a good way or a bad way. There's not nuancing in it. It's like, yeah, it's disastrous scenarios that come into my mind. And today I find myself more in a place of, I guess two things are come up for me. One is freedom. I feel freer because this is not something that takes over, decides my life, and in very small things. And that's, if you notice it there, then I'm so happy. Like, for example, I was sick the last week and a half, and I had to cancel my appointments. And then for every appointment, I debated with myself, like, can I do that? And shouldn't I go to work? And maybe the next appointment I can go. And I was so sick. I could not go to work. But every appointment I kept debating about, shouldn't I? Can I push myself? And then I just, all of a sudden I realized, like, but it's not that important as you make it out to be. It's just an appointment. Just, don't make it bigger than it is. And so what if that fails? And so what if the next one fails? It's not a big deal. You can stand up and, do what is important for you. So freedom and the importance of things, really questioning the importance of things, are two things that I can now do based on a sense of, I know who I am. And when I'm too focused on getting everything under control, I've lost myself there. I don't know who I am. I just am focused on the next thing that I need to do and do and do and do. And I am not. So I'm not in control of what I'm deciding. My attention is with other people, with a task at hand, but not with me. I'm not talking to the main person in the room.
So powerful. I can totally appreciate the place where you are in life. We connected a couple of months ago and I experienced the openness to life. And even today, right, your flexibility, your kindness, and how you're relating to all the stuff that our mind tells us. I can see that you're in a very different place. And I get curious, how will have been I have met you 20 years ago? What will the mind be telling you, right?
Oh, I can tell you that. I can tell you that. I have a history of panic attacks throughout my whole life, like severe panic attacks, and a really big fear of failing. So probably 20 years ago, you would have thought I'm a very sympathetic girl, wise. I would have, done everything you wanted of me. My heart rate would probably be up. I would be exhausted from doing the interview because it would have taken so much of me to be perfect for you. I would be worried that the interview would be good enough. And if it would have been good enough, I would still ask you for feedback because I wanted to hear that you think it's good enough. Everything was about being good enough. Everything.
Such a different place. And I think it takes a lot of courage to be making those shifts and to keep evolving with the experiences that come to us. I really admire your sense of self-reflection, of curiosity, really diving into it. It's just so powerful.
I thank you. I thank you. And at the same time, I guess that's what really connects the both of us, because I know that the same thing goes for you too. So.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I will very much appreciate it if you will subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And if you're feeling extra generous, I welcome a review on Apple Podcasts. Show notes of this episode are in the website playingitsafe.zone. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter so you can receive more tips to stop all types of unworkable playing it safe actions. See you soon!